The first time June pawed at the loose board inside the dairy barn, Owen Price thought she had found a mouse nest. But the dog kept returning to that same beam every morning until he finally put down his hammer, leaned close, and smelled old leather and paper behind the wall. That was the moment the barn stopped being a repair job. Until then, it had been another structure the town of Ash Row had nearly talked itself out of saving. The barn stood at the edge of Maple Cut Road, a long gray building with a sag in the roofline, sliding doors that stuck halfway open, and a hayloft window shaped like a tired eye. Its red paint had faded into brown. Its gutters were bent. One corner leaned just enough for people to mention it at meetings with lowered voices. The co-op board called it an asset. The insurance agent called it a concern. The county inspector called it possible with conditions. People at the diner called it the old Winslow barn, which in Ash Row meant something that belonged to memory more than use. Owen called it work. He had returned to town in early March with 2 duffel bags, a box of hand tools, a retired Navy routine he could not seem to set down, and June, a speckled cattle dog mix with clear eyes and the kind of intelligence that made ordinary objects feel like they had been placed in the room for her to evaluate. Owen was 56, broad through the shoulders, quiet in groups, and exacting with anything that involved measurements. In the Navy, he had worked in repair shops, storage rooms, small craft maintenance, and facilities upkeep. He knew how to keep equipment dry, tools accounted for, checklists current, and people moving through a task without stepping on each other's hands. He had spent years making sure practical things were ready before anyone thought to need them. Then he came home and discovered that readiness did not translate neatly into belonging. Ash Row remembered him as the Price apprentice, who had left after trade school and sent postcards for a while. Now he was the man who bought coffee alone, fixed his own porch railing, and seemed to prefer June's company to conversation. That last part was mostly true, but not because he disliked people. People asked questions that had more weight than they realized. You staying long? You glad to be back? What are you going to do now? Owen did not have tidy answers. So when the Ash Row Cooperative posted a notice asking for bids on barn stabilization, he submitted the plainest proposal in the stack. No glossy promises, no dramatic language, just assessment materials, volunteer coordination, phased repairs, safety checks, and a schedule that began with keeping rain out. The co-op board interviewed him in the library basement. "We have limited funds," said Mara Kent, the board chair. "I assumed that," Owen said. "We also have volunteers who mean well. That can be useful with structure, and difficult without it." "Yes," an older farmer named Silas folded his arms. "You think that barn is worth saving?" Owen looked at the photographs on the table. Rot at the lower trim, split door track, rusted hinge, roof leak near loft, foundation stones shifted but not gone. "I think the barn is still standing because it was built with more care than people are giving it credit for." Silas looked at him for several seconds. "That's the first decent answer I've heard." They hired him for 8 weeks. No one said the second part out loud, but Owen heard it anyway. 8 weeks to prove the barn could become something other than a liability. 8 weeks to prove he could work with the town without turning every volunteer day into a lecture. 8 weeks to prove that 2 rejected things, a worn-down barn and a veteran with more habits than friends, still had practical value. On the first morning, Owen arrived before sunrise. June jumped from the truck, sniffed the cold air, and trotted toward the sliding doors. The grounds smelled of damp grass, old hay, machine oil, and spring mud. Owen unlocked the chain, lifted the door latch, and pushed. The door moved 6 inches, groaned, then stopped. "Good start," he said. June sat as if taking minutes. He pried the lower track clear of packed dirt and rust flakes, then eased the door open 1 foot at a time. Inside, the barn held shadows, dust, and the faint sweetness of dry wood. Empty stalls lined one side. A workbench sat near the back wall. The hayloft ladder looked better than Owen expected. Sunlight entered through gaps in the boards, drawing thin lines across the floor. He did not begin with nostalgia. He began with a hazard list: loose door track, soft boards near east wall, roof leak above center bay, unstable shelf in tool room, electrical service disconnected, bird openings to seal after inspection, north wall board loose near main beam. June found the north wall board before he did. She sniffed it, pressed one paw against the lower edge, and looked back. "Later," Owen said. June disagreed, but she let him work. The first week was all weatherproofing and clearing. Owen tarped the roof leak, braced the sliding door, marked unsafe floor sections with blue tape, and set up a tool sign-out table near the entrance. Volunteers came on Saturday carrying gloves, thermoses, and the nervous energy of people who wanted to help but did not know where to stand. Owen gave them places to stand. He divided the barn into zones and wrote tasks on a sheet clipped to a board. Zone 1, sweep and sort. Zone 2, remove loose trash. Keep metal separate. Zone 3, label salvage lumber. Zone 4, inspect jars and hardware. Do not throw away fasteners. Breaks at 10 and noon. Ask before moving anything from the workbench. You run this like a ship, Silas said. I run it like a place where people make mistakes if we pretend enthusiasm is a plan, Owen replied. The word hung there. He wished he had chosen another one. Mara stepped in smoothly. I'll take Zone 3. The morning recovered. June helped in ways that did not appear on the task sheet. She carried stray gloves to the sign-out table. She found a roll of twine behind a feed bin. She sat beside volunteers who looked lost until Owen noticed and gave them a smaller task. She kept returning to the loose north wall board, touching it with her nose, then returning to Owen as if filing a repeated report. By noon, the barn looked less forgotten and more interrupted. That mattered. Forgotten places feel sealed. Interrupted places invite resumption. While sorting the workbench, Mara found a hand plane wrapped in cloth. The blade needed care, but the wooden body was smooth from use. On the side, someone had carved 2 initials. J.W. Winslow, she asked. Maybe, Silas said, or Jacob Wynn. He had the South Field before the co-op. In a drawer, they found seed envelopes from decades earlier, empty but labeled in careful handwriting. Beans, dent corn, early peas, calendula, clover. In a coffee tin were small brass tags stamped with numbers. Under the bench, Owen found a board with pencil marks showing measurements for shelves that had never been built or perhaps had been built and moved. Ordinary objects began to argue against the barn's reputation. This had not been merely a dairy barn. It had been a storage place, repair shop, seed room, meeting shelter, and exchange point. The evidence was not dramatic. It was practical. A row of hooks at wagon height. A ledger shelf without a ledger. Pencil notes on the wall near the old scale. Chalk marks beside the door. Paid in nails. Return by Friday. Seeds in tins. Ask Ruth before borrowing plane. Owen photographed each mark before anyone cleaned near it. You think this stuff matters? Silas asked. It already mattered to someone, Owen said. That answer traveled through the volunteers. By the second week, more people came. Some came to work. Some came to look. Some came because they had heard Owen was saving strange markings on barn boards and wanted to make sure he did, not throw away some family memory they had not cared about until someone else touched it. Owen accepted all of them with caution. He created a visitor table outside the barn with index cards. Name, connection to barn, what you remember, objects or markings recognized, permission to follow up. Mara laughed when she saw it. You made a memory intake form. It was that or spend all day being interrupted without notes. I like the form, good. June liked the visitor table too. She lay beneath it in the shade. Emerging when someone arrived carrying a box or a story, she had a way of nudging hands that made people slow down before speaking. Alvarez brought a coffee can of square nails her father had saved from the barn roof during an old repair. A mechanic named Bram brought a pulley he claimed belonged over the East Bay. A gardener brought seed jars. A retired bookkeeper brought 2 photographs showing a row of folding tables inside the barn, each covered with paper bags and handwritten signs. Seed swap, she said, every February. Owen studied the photo. Adults in coats stood around the tables, leaning over labels. In the background, the north wall was visible. The loose board was there, but in the photograph it looked flush. June, under the table, lifted her head. I know, Owen told her. Still he waited. He had too much respect for old structures to open a wall because a dog insisted, even a dog with June's record. First, he finished roof stabilization. Then he checked for wiring. Then he examined the wall from both sides, measured the bay, tapped around the board, and confirmed there was a shallow cavity between the interior planking and the outer sheathing near the beam. Not a large hidden room. A pocket, maybe created by framing irregularities. On a Wednesday afternoon, with Mara present as witness and Silas holding a flashlight, Owen removed the board. June sat perfectly still. Behind the wall, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather ledger. Owen did not pull it out immediately. He took photographs. He checked the cavity for dampness. He washed his hands. Then he eased the ledger free and placed it on a clean towel across 2 sawhorses. The cover was cracked but intact. A leather tie held it closed. On the first page, written in dark ink, were the words, Ash Row Barn Account and Common Use Book. Mara stopped breathing for a moment. Silas removed his cap. Owen turned the first page. The ledger began with lumber. Not a single donor, not one wealthy family. Dozens of names. Elise Ford, 2 oak beams. Jacob Wynn, nails and hinges. Ruth Caltzer, seed money from butter sales. Mateo Alvarez, stone hauling. Anna Price, 3 days cooking for work crew. Silas Gray, team and wagon, half day. Lena Choi, window glass. Harbor Supply, credit extended. Owen froze when he saw the name Price. Anna Price, his grandmother's name. Mara saw his face. Family? He read the line again. 3 days cooking for work crew. He had spent his adult life believing his family's Ash Row history was small, private, and mostly disconnected from the places people now argued over in meetings. His grandmother had been quiet, efficient, a woman who could make soup, mend a pocket, balance a household ledger, and refuse praise as if praise were an unnecessary expense. 3 days cooking for work crew. Of course, the ledger continued for pages. Contributions were not equal, but each was recorded with the same care. A beam and a jar of nails shared the page. A wagon team and a pot of stew shared the page. Seed money and glass, labor and hinges. A repaired harness, a borrowed saw. A day spent watching the gate so others could work undistracted. Every contribution had a line. Then the ledger shifted from building to use. Shared tools, seed swaps, milk roots, stormboard storage. Hay scale, repair bench, Saturday exchange, unpaid kindnesses. Owen touched the page near those last words. Unpaid kindnesses. The column listed names, but not in a way that shamed anyone. It recorded acts. Fixed wheel for Amos, no charge, he will bring beans in spring. Loaned plane to Ruth, returned sharp. Give seed potatoes to Mara Bell. Mark settled by harvest help. Repaired gate for Price family. Anna sent soup. Stored chairs for winter talks. Set aside warm corner for quiet accounts. Mara's voice softened. Quiet accounts? Owen turned a page. There it was again. Quiet accounts? Use back table. No public totals. The barn had been a co-op before the co-op had bylaws. A place where adults exchanged goods, skills, food, labor, tools, seeds, repairs, and respect without reducing every need to cash or every kindness to gossip. Silas sat on a bale they had cleared for breaks. My grandfather used to say this barn was built by everyone, he said. I thought he meant people showed up for the raising. He meant more than that, Mara said. Owen looked at June. She was watching him, ears forward, as if waiting for him to understand that the ledger had been less hidden than misplaced by time. That evening, Owen locked the barn, took the ledger to the library for safe storage, and drove home with June in the passenger seat. He did not turn on the radio. He did not want extra sound. At his kitchen table, he wrote 3 lists: structural repairs, historical preservation, possible future use. The first list was familiar. The second was careful. The third made him uneasy. Possible future use asked more from him than boards and beams. Tool library, seed swap, repair bench, co-op pickup, adult skill nights, quiet accounts. He stared at the last phrase, quiet accounts. June rested her chin on his knee. Don't start, he said. She blinked. Owen had come back to Ash Row hoping for work that ended when the invoice closed. A barn repair suited him because wood, hardware, and weather did not ask whether he felt lonely. But the ledger had turned the job inside out. Now every board he replaced seemed connected to a question the town had not asked properly. What had the barn been for? Not dairy alone. Not storage alone. Not heritage in the glass case sense. The barn had been a dignity system. People could bring what they had, receive what they needed, and leave with their standing intact. A sack of seed could sit beside a repaired tool. A pot of soup could count beside a beam. A person short on cash could settle by helping at harvest, sharpening a plane, sweeping after a meeting, or bringing beans in spring. Owen knew logistics. He also knew the difference between a handout and a well-run exchange. The next morning, he met Mara at the barn with coffee and a proposal. We should not turn the ledger into decoration, he said. Mara smiled as if she had expected this from the moment June found the wall. What should we turn it into? A working model. For the co-op, for the barn. He handed her the list. She read it slowly. Tool library, seed swap, repair bench, pickup days, skill nights, quiet accounts. With rules, you would say that. Rules are what keep kindness from becoming confusion. Mara looked toward the barn doors. And you would run it? Owen stiffened. I did not say that. You wrote the list. A list is not a life sentence. No one said it was. June walked between them and placed one paw on Owen's boot. Mara noticed. She has an opinion. She always does. The co-op board called an open meeting the following week. Owen hated open meetings in the abstract, but this one surprised him. People came not to debate whether the ledger was interesting, but to bring pieces of it forward. Mrs. Alvarez brought stories of seed potatoes and tool trades. Bram brought a drawer of old tags from his repair shop. The gardener brought jars and labels for a seed exchange. The retired bookkeeper offered to design a simple account system. Silas offered 2 workbenches if someone could haul them. Mara offered the co-op's insurance contact, and a promise to listen before editing Owen's procedures. That last one drew laughter. Owen presented the phased plan. Phase 1, stabilize and preserve. Phase 2, open limited tool lending with sign-out rules. Phase 3, seed swap and repair bench. Phase 4, monthly adult skill nights. Phase 5, evaluate co-op pickup and quiet account system. Someone asked what quiet accounts meant. Owen chose his words carefully. It means people can exchange labor, goods, or skills without explaining their finances in front of the room. Values are posted. Trades are recorded privately. The goal is not secrecy. The goal is dignity. The room went quiet. Then Silas said, "We used to know that." No one argued. The restoration accelerated after that, but Owen kept it disciplined. He had seen enthusiasm ruin good projects by skipping boring foundations. So he made the boring foundations visible. Moisture control, door repair, safe lighting, tool inventory, fire code view, lift limits, first aid kit, sweep schedule, pest prevention, storage zones, signage, volunteer check-in, public hours. "You make everything sound less romantic," Mara said one afternoon while they were marking shelf's height. Good. That was not a complaint. Still good. Romance had nearly let the barn collapse by admiring it from a distance. Use would save it, but only if use came with care. June continued to find small pieces of the old system. Behind a loose stair tread, she found a bundle of brass tags stamped with tool numbers. Under the old grain bin, she found a tin of pencil stubs and folded seed labels. Near the back door, she found a leather strap with the words "back table" burned into it. In the loft, she sniffed out a crate of ledger paper, blank and waiting, wrapped so tightly it had survived better than anyone expected. Each discovery became part of the new plan. The brass tags became the basis for tool library numbers. The seed labels inspired the new seed envelopes. The back table strap gave Owen the location for quiet account intake. The blank ledger paper became the first pages of the new common use book. The old barn was not asking them to copy the past exactly. It was offering parts. By May, the roof no longer leaked. The sliding doors moved smoothly. The north wall board had been replaced with a hinged panel and a small sign explaining where the ledger had been found. The preserved original was kept at the library, but a copy sat in the barn beneath a protective cover. Beside it was the new ledger, bound in sturdy cloth with columns Owen and the bookkeeper designed together. Date, name or account number. Item or service, borrowed, given, traded, repaired, learned, return or follow-up, notes. The word charity appeared nowhere. The first tool library day opened under gray skies. Owen expected a slow start. He had printed rules, laid out sign-out cards, cleaned and tagged tools, set deposits, marked return dates, and trained 3 volunteers. He had also prepared himself for disappointment, because new systems often began with people watching from a distance. Instead, a line formed at the barn doors before 10. A woman borrowed clamps to fix a table. A man checked out a post-hole digger for a community garden fence. A cafe owner borrowed a level and returned it 2 hours later with muffins. Bram donated a socket set. Silas checked out nothing, then sat near the workbench telling people which tools he had once seen misused and why that should not happen again. "Useful," Owen admitted. "That's the nicest thing you have said to me," Silas replied. At noon, a woman approached the back table carrying a broken wooden stool. She looked around, unsure whether to join the public sign-out line. June rose from her mat and walked to her. Owen followed. "What needs fixing?" he asked. "The crosspiece," the woman said. "I do not know if it is worth repairing." "Do you use it?" "Every day." "Then it is worth assessing." She relaxed at the word assessing. It asked for no confession. Bram repaired the stool with her watching, explaining each step. She paid with cash and a promise to bring herb seedlings for the seed swap. Owen recorded the exchange privately under an account number, then gave her a receipt that said stool repair, settled by herb seedlings pending. She read it and smiled. "That sounds official." "It is." "Good." The seed swap opened 2 weeks later. The barn smelled like soil, paper envelopes, coffee, and rain on wool coats. Tables were arranged by type. Beans, greens, herbs, flowers, grains, cover crops, save seed, purchased extra, advice unknown but promising. Owen had objected to the last category until the gardener insisted life needed one table for uncertainty. He allowed it, with labels. People brought jars, envelopes, notes, and growing tips. The new seed labels copied the old style found behind the grain bin. Each packet carried name, year, source, and one practical note: needs trellis, good in heavy soil, start early, share back if it grows well. At the ledger table, June lay beside the chair where Anna Price's contribution had been copied onto a display card. 3 days cooking for work crew. Owen had not planned to mention it. Mara did. Owen's grandmother helped feed the original barn crew, she told a visitor. Owen looked up sharply. Mara did not apologize. The visitor, an older woman with seed packets in both hands, turned to him. "Then you came by it honestly." Owen did not know what to say. June pressed against his leg. "Maybe," he said. "It was enough." The repair bench became the barn's heartbeat. People brought chairs, lamps, garden tools, torn canvas, loose handles, cracked crates, and one wooden sign that had fallen from the old feed store. Owen established a rule that repairs were not done behind a curtain. Whenever practical, the owner learned alongside the repairer. The goal was not only to fix objects, but to return skill to the person who needed the object. Navy habits served him well here. He broke tasks into steps. He labeled drawers. He created checklists that volunteers teased him about until they needed them. He trained backups. He insisted every borrowed tool return clean. He logged recurring repairs so the co-op could buy common parts in bulk. He posted a communication board so people did not rely on memory for schedule changes. "You ever get tired of writing things down?" Bram asked. "No, never. I get tired of fixing problems caused by nobody writing things down." Bram considered that fair. The first adult skill night took place in June. Topic: practical maintenance for small places. Owen expected people to prefer gardening or cooking. Instead, the barn filled with adults who wanted to know how to tighten a hinge, shut off water to a sink, read a fuse label, clean a filter, store tools, and keep a basic home maintenance log without feeling foolish. Owen taught with a calmness that came from years of explaining practical systems to people who had to learn quickly and remember under pressure. He never made anyone feel slow. That became the thing people told each other. "Ask Owen. He explains without making you regret asking." The first time he heard that, he walked behind the barn and stood alone for 3 minutes. June came with him, of course. "I am fine," he said. She leaned into his knee. "Mostly fine." The barn kept revealing itself in layers. When they cleaned the loft, they found initials carved into beams. Not random marks, work crew initials matched in the old ledger to dates and tasks. Under the east eave, they found boards from at least 6 kinds of wood, confirming the barn had been built from contributed lumber. Near the old scale, a chalkboard slid out from behind a panel, still faintly marked with numbers from a milk route and a seed exchange tally. In a rusted tin, they found paper tokens used for tool deposits. Every object gave the same message. This place had been shared on purpose. That mattered because sharing without purpose can turn messy. Purpose without sharing can turn cold. The old barn had balanced both, and the new co-op began learning the balance again. There were mistakes. A borrowed saw came back late. A seed table got mislabeled. 2 volunteers disagreed about whether repairs should have fixed prices or suggested trades. Someone left the back door unlatched. A workshop night ran over time and forgot cleanup. Owen handled each mistake as a system issue first, not a character flaw. "What failed?" he would ask. At first, people defended themselves. "I did not mean to. I thought Mara had it. Nobody told me." Owen would nod and repeat, "What failed?" Eventually, they learned the answer might be sign placement, unclear handoff, missing return reminder, too few volunteers, or a rule that sounded obvious only to the person who wrote it. Each fix went into the binder. The binder grew thick. Owen secretly loved that. By late summer, the barn was open 3 days a week, tool library on Tuesdays, repair bench on Thursdays, seed and co-op exchange on Saturdays. Monthly skill nights rotated between maintenance, cooking for work crews, basic bookkeeping, preserving produce, radio communication for rural weather updates, and sewing heavy canvas. The back table became the quietest success. No signs explained it fully. People who needed it learned by asking or by being guided gently by June, who had developed an uncanny habit of greeting certain visitors and walking them to that corner. There, a volunteer would discuss trades, delayed payments, or skill exchanges without an audience. Records were kept with account numbers. Values were posted. Nobody had to perform gratitude. One Thursday, Silas sat beside Owen at the back table after closing. "I thought quiet accounts were old-fashioned," he said. "They are. Turns out old-fashioned and useful overlap sometimes. Often." Silas looked toward the ledger copy. "My family owed in that book more than they gave." Owen said nothing. "I used to feel embarrassed about that. The ledger does not read that way." No. It reads like people taking turns." Silas looked at him, eyes bright but steady. "That's a better way to say it." Owen turned a pencil between his fingers. "It is a better way to build it, too." In September, the co-op board held a harvest exchange in the barn. The event looked simple from outside. Tables of produce, seed-saving demonstrations, repaired tools for pickup, soup in the corner, a sign-up sheet for winter skill nights. But to Owen, every detail felt like a line from the old ledger translated into present tense. Anna Price's work crew soup returned as a volunteer meal station. Shared tools hung on numbered hooks. Seed jars sat under labeled signs. The back table handled private trades. The repair bench stayed open for small fixes. The new ledger filled page after page. Near the end of the day, Mara placed a framed copy of the first ledger page on the wall beside the hinged panel where June had found the book. Owen read the names again. Elise Ford, Jacob Wynn, Ruth Calder, Mateo Alvarez, Anna Price, Silas Gray, Lena Choi. Then he looked around the barn at the new names, new hands, new jars, new tools, and June sleeping beneath the workbench like she had done all she came to do. Mara stood beside him. "You know this is more than 8 weeks now," she said. "I noticed. Board wants to offer you the barn manager position. Part-time pay, full-time authority over systems, because apparently you refuse to let anyone put hammers in the wrong drawer. They do go in the wrong drawer. That is why the position exists." He kept his eyes on the ledger page. "I would need 2 trained backups, already in the proposal. Budget for maintenance, not just programs. Included, written policy for quiet accounts. You wrote it. Board approved? Pending your acceptance." June opened one eye. Owen exhaled, then yes. Mara smiled. That sounded almost easy. It was not. Still counts. The second chance did not make Owen suddenly talkative. He did not become the cheerful face of the co-op or the kind of man who lingered at every table. He remained himself, which turned out to be exactly what the barn needed. Precise, patient, unimpressed by shortcuts, respectful of old things without letting them gather dust for admiration alone. And slowly, Ashrow learned how to approach him. Bring a specific problem. Accept the clipboard. Return tools clean. Do not move labels. Say hello to June first if conversation feels hard. It worked. In winter, the barn hosted a repair series called Keep It Working. Adults brought small heaters, lamps, chairs, coats, garden tools, and kitchen items. Owen opened each session with the same line. "We are here to understand why something failed, fix what we can, and leave better instructions for the next person." Nobody knew if he meant the objects, the barn, or themselves. That was fine. It applied to all 3. The first night of Keep It Working nearly proved his point too well. Snow had begun falling before sunset, soft enough to make the road quiet, but not enough to close anything. Owen considered postponing, then checked the sign-up sheet. 12 adults had written their names. 6 had added notes beside them. Lamp switch, sticky drawer, coat snap, loose stool, small heater question, garden pruner spring. He opened the barn. Mara arrived with the new ledger. Bram brought a parts box. Silas carried a thermos and declared its supervision. The bookkeeper brought account cards. June walked the center aisle, nose low, inspecting every table like she had been promoted without notice. At 6:15, people began coming in with objects wrapped in towels, bags, and old boxes. Owen had expected embarrassment. Instead, he saw relief. A broken lamp looked less like personal failure when it sat beside 11. Other ordinary problems waiting for patient hands. He started with the sticky drawer because it was simple and visible. The owner, a woman named Nell, said she had been tugging on it for months. Owen placed it on the bench, showed the group how to look for rub marks, swelling, and loose runners, then handed Nell the sanding block. "You do the first pass," he said. "Me? It is your drawer." She sanded carefully, tested, sanded again, and smiled when the drawer slid without complaint. That smile did more for the room than any speech could have. After that, people leaned closer. Bram showed how to replace a lamp switch with the power cord unplugged and the steps written down before reassembly. Mara sorted coats snaps by size. Silas demonstrated why a loose stool needed clamping time, not constant checking. The bookkeeper logged trades at the back table, turning muffins, sanding help, and seed sorting into official settlement without making any of it feel small. Happy June found the missing pruner spring under a folded coat. Calm, the group applauded softly. Matter-of-fact, June accepted this as reasonable. Short pause. Calm. At the end of the night, Owen wrote a new procedure in the binder. Matter-of-fact for repair nights, begin with one object everyone can understand. Calm, let the owner make the first safe adjustment. Wistful confidence spreads better when people watch a neighbor learn. Short pause. Curious. He did not know he had written a philosophy until Mara read it over his shoulder. Pause. Matter-of-fact, that is going on the wall, she said. Calm, it is going in the binder. Matter-of-fact, both. Wistful, the wall is getting crowded. Happy, so is the barn. That is the point. Calm, the phrase went on the wall 2 weeks later, copied in plain letters near the workbench. Wistful confidence spreads better when people watch a neighbor learn. Happy. Owen pretended to object, then measured the frame to make sure it hung level. Short pause. Matter-of-fact. Another change came from the seed side of the barn. Calm, the old seed swaps had been seasonal, but the new co-op needed continuity. Curious, the gardener, whose name was Ruthie, asked for a seed library shelf. Matter of fact, Owen resisted until she brought him a plan with inventory cards, return envelopes, moisture notes, and a checkout system modeled after the tool library. "You used my own method against me," he said. Happy, "I learned from the best available nuisance." Calm, he approved the shelf. Short pause. Calm, June found the right place for it by sitting beneath the east window where the light was good, but not harsh. Curious, Ruthie claimed the dog understood seeds. Matter of fact, Owen said the dog understood where people would gather without blocking the aisle. Wistful, both could be true. Calm, the seed library became another quiet account. Matter of fact, people could take a packet, leave a packet, write a note, or promise to bring seed back after harvest. Calm, no one measured generosity by volume. Wistful, a person with one envelope of beans received the same careful entry as a person with a crate. Short pause. Wistful, Owen liked that more than he said. Pause. Matter of fact. The final piece of winter preparation was backup training, which Owen treated with a seriousness that made the volunteers groan until the first time it worked. Calm, he chose Mara, Bram, and Ruthie as the first 3 crew leads, then made each of them teach a procedure back to him. Matter of fact, Mara handled quiet accounts. Matter of fact, Bram handled tool checkout. Matter of fact, Ruthie handled seed library intake. Calm, Owen stood with his arms folded while they explained key locations, ledger entries, end-of-night checks, and what to do if someone brought a problem that did not fit the form. Short pause. Curious. "You are enjoying this," Mara said. Wistful, "I enjoy not being the only person who knows where things are." Happy, that may be the most Owen sentence ever spoken. Pause. Matter of fact. The test came when Owen's truck would not start on a Thursday afternoon. Tense, by the time he got to the barn, late and annoyed, the repair night was already running. Calm, Mara had opened the back table. Calm, Bram had checked out tools. Calm, Ruthie had made coffee because the kitchen volunteer had been delayed. Matter of fact. Silas had written the first 3 entries in the ledger with handwriting that looked like fence wire, but could be read if a person cared enough. Short pause. Wistful, June trotted to Owen, greeted him once, then returned to the workbench as if informing him he was not required for every breath the barn took. Pause. Matter of fact, that should have bothered him. Exhales. Calm, instead, he felt a relief so clean it almost made him laugh. Pauses. Wistful, a place was not truly restored if it depended on one tired person to unlock every useful act. Matter of fact, the old ledger had taught that. Calm, Anna Price had cooked for the work crew, but she had not built the barn alone. Matter of fact, Mateo hauled stone. Matter of fact, Ruth brought seed money. Matter of fact, Lena brought glass. Wistful, each line mattered because no line pretended to be the whole page. Calm, Owen added a new rule to the binder that night. Matter of fact, no system is finished until someone else can run it kindly. Short pause. Wistful, this time. When Mara said it belonged on the wall, he did not argue. Calm, he only asked for a level. Happy, June watched the frame go up, then sat beneath it as if checking the placement. Matter of fact, on a cold Saturday in February, 1 year after Owen first saw the bid notice, the co-op held the revived seed swap. Calm, snow melted along the road edges. Calm, the barn doors stood open. Inside, tables were full, the stove corner was warm, and the air smelled of coffee, paper, wool coats, and soil waking in jars. Short pause. Calm, a new generation of seed packets filled the tables, but the old labels inspired everyone. Wistful, June moved from person to person, accepting gentle pats, then returned to the north wall and sat beneath the hinged panel. Short pause. Calm, Owen followed her gaze. Wistful, the panel was closed now, the ledger safe at the library, the copy in use, the story no longer trapped behind a board. Calm, he crouched beside the dog and touched the place where old leather and paper had changed. The assignment. Wistful, good find, he said. Calm, June leaned into him. Short pause. Matter of fact, across the barn, Silas was teaching someone how to sharpen a hoe. Calm, Mara was helping at the quiet accounts table. Calm, Bram was checking tools back in. Calm, the gardener was explaining why beans needed better labels. Calm, a woman carried soup to the volunteer table. Happy, someone laughed near the seed jars. Calm, someone else asked where to return a borrowed clamp, and 3 people answered at once. Pause. Wistful, the barn had not been restored to become a museum. Matter of fact, it had been restored to become legible again. Calm, that evening, after the last table was folded and the floor swept, Owen opened the new common use book. Matter of fact, he wrote the day's final entry in his careful block handwriting. Matter-of-fact seed swap reopened. Matter-of-fact 43 participants. Matter-of-fact tools checked out 6. Matter-of-fact repairs completed 9. Matter-of-fact quiet accounts 4. Matter-of-fact soup provided by volunteer crew. Calm June stationed at North Wall most of afternoon. Short pause, hesitates. He paused, then added one more line. Pause, calm barn held. Pause, calm, he closed the ledger and listened. Drawn-out wind moved softly along the eaves. Calm, the doors were latched. Calm, tools hung in their outlines. Calm, seed jars waited on shelves. Calm, the back table was clean. Wistful June slept on a folded blanket near the workbench. Wistful for the first time since returning to Ash Row, Owen felt no urge to leave before anyone asked too much of him. Short pause, matter-of-fact. The town had asked plenty. Matter-of-fact, be here. Matter-of-fact, fix this. Matter-of-fact, teach us. Matter-of-fact, write it down. Matter-of-fact, help us trade without shame. Matter-of-fact, show us where the hammer goes. Matter-of-fact, keep the roof from leaking. Matter-of-fact, keep the old care working in new hands. Calm, those were questions he could answer. Short pause. Calm, in the morning there would be another list. Wistful, there always was. Matter-of-fact, a sticking latch. Matter-of-fact, a missing seed label. Matter-of-fact, a shelf to reinforce. Matter-of-fact, a volunteer to train. Matter-of-fact, a repair card to file. Matter-of-fact, a beam to check after thaw. Calm, Owen welcomed the thought. Pause, calm outside. Ash Row settled into winter evening. Calm inside, the barn stood square enough, warm enough, useful enough. Short pause, wistful, not perfect. Calm, better than perfect. Calm, in use. Wistful, and beneath the north wall, where a dog had refused to stop pawing at one loose board, the old beam held the marks of the people who had built the place by bringing what they had. Calm Owen turned off the workbench light, called June to his side, and looked once more at the ledger shelf. Wistful tomorrow, he said. Happy June wagged. Calm together, they stepped out through the sliding doors, leaving the barn ready for the next useful thing.